Welcome to today's episode of our Dollars and Cents podcast. If you're listening to the Dollars and Cents podcast for the first time, it's a show where we get people to discuss some of the most interesting and practical finance topics that impact your everyday life. Today, we're tackling a topic that is essential but often misunderstood: investing and retirement planning, why they are not the same thing. To help unpack this, I'm joined by Dinesh from our editorial team. Dinesh, welcome to the show.
Well, happy to be here, unpacking interesting financial topics again.
And most of us know the importance of planning for our retirement. As we grow older, there comes a point where we may no longer want to or be able to work. Yet, we still need to meet daily expenses and ideally maintain the lifestyle we enjoy or would like to have during retirement. This is where retirement planning comes into play. It ensures we have a reliable stream of income to sustain us throughout our retirement years. On the other hand, for many people, they may feel that they have to invest towards their retirement, but that investing often comes with taking on risks to grow our wealth. So while investing involves taking on risks, retirement planning often prioritizes security. And so let's dive into this topic. And Dinesh, my first question that I want to ask you is, do you think it's common for people to lump investing and retirement planning together?
I think in both instances, right, the similarity here is that we're trying to build wealth. So maybe that's where the conception comes about, right? But retirement planning has a targeted goal, to me at least, right? There's a targeted goal. We're trying to build our wealth for the long term and, for when we eventually stop earning an active income from work, right? So this means we need to plan for, drawing down an income from our retirement plan and not just growing an investment portfolio, right? And then investing, on the other hand, means, it can be for retirement, but it can also be for other financial goals. So when you say investing alone, there's no financial goal attached to it. Right, you can be investing for anything. You can be investing for retirement, but you can also be investing for other purposes, right?
Yeah, I think timeline is for sure one of those things that, has a difference for sure. Because I think retirement planning or retirement in general is something that you can't compromise on, right? Because all of us, eventually, I think, one day, we probably want to stop working, right? You can't be like, not saying you can't, but at 75 to 80, you may not be able to work even if you really want.
So that's even if you plan to work all the way, you may not be able to, right?
Yeah, whereas when I think of investing, I find that sometimes investment goals are compromisable, right? Ideally, we want to achieve our investment goal, but like what you say, right? If I'm investing towards my child's education, let's say by the time they reach tertiary in age on 18, 19 years old, they want to go to overseas university, but I don't have that, $100,000, $200,000 to send them overseas for a few years. It's still okay, right? There's still other ways around it. You can study in Singapore, it'll be cheaper. You can even take a student loan, or they can take a student loan. So I feel like that's one thing. Like retirement planning to me is not something you can compromise on. Investing, on the other hand, some of your investment goals, they might be good to have, but not like absolute must have. How do you feel about it?
I think, like when I say at the start, there's a financial goal attached to retirement planning, right? Whereas investing, there's no real financial goal. We're just investing to build our wealth, right? Which is why
some people may say they want to invest towards starting a business or get a car.
So that financial goal is that buying a car or starting a business, right? Whereas when you say investing can be for many purposes, when you talk about financial goals, it goes beyond investing. Investing is just maybe a subset even. Retirement planning is a bit more comprehensive, right?
Yeah.
When you plan for retirement, you should also be planning outside of, wealth accumulation, right? You should be thinking about your protection needs, especially in your senior years.
Yeah.
You should be thinking about your housing needs, your medical needs. So retirement planning is so much more than just investing.
Most of us are usually quite fascinated with retirement planning in the sense of how much do we need, when can we retire in terms of monetary sense. What are some areas you think people should be thinking about when it comes to retirement planning in Singapore?
I think before tackling the question, we need to talk about like the whole retirement planning on its own. I feel there's a lot of inertia to start planning for retirement because typically it involves a very large amount, like a dollar amount. And then secondly, it's so far away that people prioritize the shorter term retirement, shorter term financial plans,
Yeah.
So,
if you are our age or younger, retirement could be like 30 years away.
30 years away. I think when we start plan or why we should start planning, is because with more time in the market or more time to plan, we typically come up with a better plan. And then obviously we said at the start, investing is a subset. So with more time in the market, then we can see our wealth like grow through the economic cycles as well. Because as we all know, economic cycles go up and down. So we want to see our wealth kind of go through the up and down, but ride out over the long term to go up.
Yeah, I think even if you don't want to ride up the ups and downs, you can also use for example, the CPF system, 4% per annum base interest rate, and more time in the system will allow that 4% to compound over a longer period of time, right? Because 18 years you double, another 18 years you double the capital.
Yeah. I mean, no retirement plan in Singapore can be assessed without CPF right now, because from the day we start working, we start contributing to this thing called our special account.
Yep.
And that is really literally meant for your long-term retirement plans.
Yep.
Right. And I think the other thing about starting a retirement plan early is also gives you that peace of mind, to achieve other financial goals. So what I mean is that because you know there's this recurring thing, continuing thing that you're doing with your finances each month, not just into the special account, but maybe you're doing other things. It gives you that peace of mind to maybe like you mentioned, you want to start a business, you want to have other financial goals. You can start putting your finances towards them without compromising your retirement plans.
Right. So it's pretty much what you're saying is that the long-term journey could be your retirement plan, but in between you may have other goals you want to achieve.
Yeah.
But these goals should ideally not come at the expense of your long-term retirement plan.
Correct. And then in a long about way to answer your question finally, when we actually start doing something, taking actions, we can start by, estimating how much we will need in retirement, right? And for this, we can just use, maybe our current lifestyle, or maybe extrapolate to the lifestyle we wish to need in retirement. Just put a dollar amount. It's not going to be entirely accurate, but, if you see the current lifestyle you're leading is worth $3,000 or $4,000.
Minus the kids, ideally.
Minus kids, minus the household, home mortgage, minus some of these expenses.
Which would have been paid off, or
Correct.
at least not your responsibility by the time you retire.
And then that's like a decent estimate. And then obviously, you have to layer on inflation over X amount of years. So for us, maybe 30, for some people, maybe 40, right? So you have to layer it on. And then that's where you get, hey, this is the amount maybe I need during retirement.
I think one of the things also I always tell people, or at least we talk about in Singapore, is that your retirement plans almost always take into consideration your housing needs, your housing, where you're going to stay, right? And I think in Singapore, it's very difficult for us, or at least in my opinion, it's very challenging to separate home purchase from your retirement plan, because obviously these things are interrelated. How do you think home purchase and retirement planning in Singapore are interrelated, especially given the fact that in Singapore most of us will own our own place?
And I think having a home that is fully paid up during our retirement is important, vitally important, right? We're not working and earning an active income anymore, so we shouldn't actually be paying off a monthly recurring loan. So
I can't imagine the stress.
Right.
If you're not working already, you're not in active employment, and you still have to worry about making a home mortgage payment. I think almost everyone would rather have cleared their home mortgage payment before they retire.
Yeah, so I think what this just means to me at least is that your home mortgage payment plan and your retirement plan has to go hand in hand, right? For sure. And then what that means is that, spending too much on your home and then trying to maximize the amount of years you can pay is not going to be great if you're compromising your retirement plans then.
I guess what you're saying is that if you, you might be young, you might be our age or even a bit younger, and you're buying your first HDB flat, or you're thinking of upgrading to a private property, and the loan amount might look significant, but because you have a long period to pay off, you think you can potentially pay the loan on a monthly installment, but then what you are actually sacrificing is that you might need to pay all the way till in your 60s, which is maybe not idealist.
It's definitely not ideal if you're sacrificing, putting aside enough. So you have to do that plan that we talked about earlier, right? You have to calculate what that figure is that you might need in retirement and how you're going to achieve it, right? And then if you're doing that plan and then you realize, hey, you're setting aside too much money into your home purchase, right? So you're compromising your retirement plan actually. Then obviously the obvious pushback in Singapore context, the pushback is that, hey, property prices has been increasing over the last few decades. How can we not put our money into it? It's one way that we can monetize during our retirement. That's something that, we commonly hear. We have to personally see whether, that's the way we really want to monetize our asset. After living in a home for 30 years, do you really want to downgrade when you are going to be home most of the time in your retirement years?
I just want to add one more thing, which I feel is always commonly not thought about, which is the interest cost that comes with taking a loan over a 30-year period. Right.
Yeah.
So while you might be right in saying that, property price may likely go up in the future because of general inflation, I think quite often people don't consider the interest cost they may have paid over that 20 to 30-year mortgage.
Yep.
And they only look at just, their purchase price without taking into consideration the interest costs, the renovation costs, the housing transaction, stamp duty tax they may have paid. So while you might think from an absolute term, 20 years from now, the property price is worth more than it is today, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are actually making a good return or even any return once you take into consideration all these additional costs that you incur. I think a lot of people don't realize that, your home purchase at age 30 can affect your retirement at age 68, 65, right? It might seem like your home purchase and your retirement is a very a long period apart, but they do have an effect on each other, right? So if you buy a home that is very expensive at age 30 and you pay a very high mortgage each month because of the installments are higher, you probably need to maybe max out your OA plus some cash, I think. Then you basically would have less for your retirement, because instead of being able to say transfer your OA to your SA to earn a higher interest rate, or maybe even contribute your cash, top up your CPF account or invest your money for your retirement, you end up using all of it for your home. Actually, I just want to say also, there is talking about how retirement and your home purchase are intertwined, are related, right? I think there is this CPF Home Purchase Planner that I've been using recently that was introduced. And I think it's actually a very useful tool because it takes into consideration a few things that, as a home buyer in Singapore, you should think about before you actually decide how much you can afford a home. And this is going beyond just, the property calculators that tells you the maximum amount you can borrow, right? Firstly, if you log into it, you can use your SingPass. So with your SingPass, it gives you the details that is customized or personalized to you, and you will be able to see some of the pre-filled detailed data, right? So this will include your employment income. Yeah. It will include your existing CPF savings. So that's obviously important because it will then determine how much you can potentially afford for down payment and things like that. Yeah. Right. The other thing also is that it does allow you to indicate whether you have an existing property that you wish to sell and how much you think you can sell. So for people like us, if we're changing our flat, or we're upgrading or right sizing, obviously our next property purchase, part of it will be paid for with our current property, right? Quite logically, unless you have too much money, right? So for most of us, we will fund it using our existing property. So you can take that into consideration as well. And then obviously the last thing at which I cannot forget is then you set your retirement goals. If you want $3,000 for your retirement, then there is a certain sum that you need by age 65 to be able to get that kind of CPF life payout, right? And $3,000 not in terms of absolute term, but in terms of what it means in terms of your purchasing power at that point in time. So if you are like us, you are 30 years away from retirement, and you say you need, say, $2,000 a month for your expenses, that is actually about $3,500 worth in 30 years based on, a 2% inflation calculation. So it takes that into consideration as well. And last but not least, and I think this is also very useful in Singapore, you can have the option to add your spouse income. Because most of us, I think, buy a HDB flat or a private property using 2% income.
I mean, this calculator is great. I was just trying to Google it and see how it works while you're explaining that. And I think you're right. Most of the time when we think about property calculators, we always think about what's the maximum amount we can borrow.
That's what the bank wants you to do. So just because you can afford to borrow more doesn't mean you should borrow more, right? So I think that's one thing to take note. I just want to ask, besides financial planning, besides planning for your income and housing, what other things do you think retirees should consider when it comes to retirement planning?
I think that's very true. We touched upon it at the start as well. Retirement plan should not only be finances or investments, right? They should also touch things like, your medical needs. As you grow older, while no one wants, naturally your health starts to deteriorate as you grow older, right? So you need to account for medical expenses. And this is why maybe, your MediSave account become quite important. You might want to also prioritize hitting the basic healthcare sum, right? The BHS.
Because I think a lot of times when I see it as an attitude among our friends as well, right? A lot of people will ask so much in my MediSave for what, right? Because I don't use it, right? But what you say, right? You don't use it because we're lucky not to use it because we are working adults, we're still healthy. We don't need to use our MediSave as much unless, you delivering or giving birth, that kind of things. And you'll expend a little bit more. MediShield life premiums, private integrated shield plan. But in general, you won't spend so much from your MediSave when you are younger.
Correct. I also think the BHS gives us a very good indicator on what we may need at a basic level. Every time you ask, how much you need for retirement, then no one knows the answer. But at least the BHS tells you, hey, this is what you may need at the base case.
Yeah, especially when you're in your older age or so. But I also think that sometimes in Singapore, I think we have reached the age where, we have a lot of elderlies in Singapore right now. But a lot of times, I think the full cost of their healthcare needs is not totally recognized because of things like the Pioneer Generation Package, the Merdeka Generation Package, and young seniors get the Majula Package as well, right? So because of all these government top up and government subsidies for MediSave, MediShield Life, and even your own outpatient subsidies, right? I think a lot of times we are underestimating. I think we are actually underestimating the full cost of these healthcare services simply because a lot of the older generation people do enjoy healthcare subsidies. My parents do, right? So they go to the polyclinic and they are largely subsidized. And healthcare expenses will also increase
for sure
over time, right? As medical advancement
is achieved. Inflation also typically outpaces normal inflation.
Yeah. And I just want to say also, our parents' time, the Pioneer Generation people, I think they were also from an era where economic wealth wasn't really significant in Singapore, right? So in the early days of their employment, they don't earn as much, they don't get to compound as much as we do these days.
Correct.
Where the salary, the fresh grad salary is really quite high, and you just get to compound at the early stage.
Right now, when we're in our 20s, 30s, right up to like even in our retirement days, we need to always have this 6 months of rainy day fund, because once we start using it, there's very little chance to, okay, let me top it up with next month's salary. There's no salary.
Yeah, no, I guess there is a salary in the sense that, if we presume that you have CPF Life and that CPF Life amount, it's, equivalent to what you need each month. I think that's a good start, assuming you have no other investment returns. But I think what you say is true, right? If your CPF Life payout and your monthly expenses is about the same,
correct,
then what happens if there's an emergency? You also need to have some savings you can tap on. As opposed to just, waiting for next month's CPF Life payout to be given. Yeah. And then obviously, your activities during retirement may cost you also, depending on what kind of hobbies you like. If you want to play golf every day, then it'll be a bit more expensive.
If you want to golf or travel, which I think Singaporeans love doing, then you need to set aside more. Maybe CPF might not be enough because it's meant for basic retirement. If you want these perks, then maybe you have to set aside a little bit more. But at the same time, I think what you're trying to say is some of these non-financial considerations where, you need a community around you. You want to still have friends. You don't work, so you don't have colleagues. You don't have work friends anymore. But you still need like a community. So for one example is that my mum, right? She joined Healthy 365.
Right.
So
get free money, vouchers.
Maybe vouchers to even grocery vouchers. I'm not sure. I haven't done it myself. She does it to go to these centers to have activities. I think like Pilates or some activities, or line dancing even, with like other seniors or other people. Right. So I think that community is something that she does. She does it like 2-3 times every week.
Yeah.
And then she starts knowing the people there, and then she wants to go there.
Yeah. It's so important because not just it gives you something to do, but also it keeps you active, right?
And then I feel like beyond this, there are people like my dad who they're at the retirement age as well, but they don't want to just fully retire and not do anything. So, and then they don't want to like maybe participate in this community, but they want to still have a meaningful, purposeful life. So he continues to run his like small tailoring outfit, just to continue doing work. He don't need to earn like the big bucks like how he used to.
Yeah, I was just smiling because I just recalled how like, I think it must be like 5 to 10 years ago where, anyone who says that, oh, it's good for the elderly to continue working will just get cancelled. And I hope it doesn't happen to me. But now that, I'm seeing it around in like people that I know who are in their 60s, I think there is some element of like, it is true that some of the older people who can actually retire still want to do part-time work. I'm not too sure if they just like the income. When I know them, I feel like they can choose not to work if they want to, like maybe your dad and some other people I know. But for some reason, they still want to continue working. And I can imagine why they want to do it, because if you like something that you're doing, and anyway you're just getting paid a little bit, you're not really caring about maximizing your earning potential anymore. It might be something that you still feel gives you that sense of purpose.
Yeah, right. And you continue meeting people, right? So that non-financial element comes into play as well.
Right. But I just want to say it cautiously, because I'm not trying to say that it's good for older people to work. I'm just saying that some people
it's an option.
do want to, even though they can retire.
Yeah.
They have their retirement, they have their CPF Life payout already.
Correct. And then maybe just a final add-on to that. I'm sure maybe you have like personal experiences as well. But my mum, apart from doing this, she was also taking care of my kids. So there's that. I wouldn't say that's her job, but she at least has that community around her as well.
Yeah. I think I read it somewhere that, grandparents and grandchildren are actually the best combination for one another.
Yeah.
Right? Because grandparents get a lot of energy, and they need the energy, by the way, looking after their grandkids. And grandkids, obviously, they look up to their grandparents, and they hear a lot of stories about how Singapore was last time, how life is. And it's actually a very good combination. And I mean, we've discussed a lot, but I just want to talk about retirement now, just really for people that are maybe not really approaching retirement yet, because we know, what the older people are doing. But let's talk about fresh grads, right? Probably, in their 20s now, 40 years to retirement. Do they need to start thinking about it today?
The earlier you start, the better it is, right? So from the time you start earning your first salary, you can really start planning for retirement.
I mean, even if you don't plan for retirement, I think a lot of people don't realize the second you earn your first salary, you are already planning for your retirement, because you have CPF contribution that's being made to your OA, SA, and obviously MediSave.
I had like a fun fact just clicked in my mind. I think I wrote an article about it, so we can share it again. But if you make a CPF contribution, especially to RST, right, the retirement sum topping up scheme, make a CPF contribution to your special account in your younger years, so like before you accumulate too much CPF money.
Good problem.
You get to earn the full extent of the extra 1% on your first 60,000.
Right.
Because the bulk of your money goes into OA when you first start working. So you will have a lot of money, or a lot more money in OA compared to your SA, but only 20,000 from your OA can earn the first
1%.
Yeah, only the first 20,000 can earn the extra 1%, right? So if you top up your SA, I'm not saying everyone must do that, but it's just a fun fact.
Yeah.
I think the other thing maybe fresh graduates or people who are younger can afford to do, especially in the younger days, don't go out of your way to inflate your lifestyle every time you get a pay raise. Because you're in the younger years, you're starting at the base salary, right? You are definitely going to earn more as you climb the corporate ladder, as you gain more experience. So don't be so quick to just inflate a lifestyle with every pay raise. It may or may not happen.
Yeah.
So you can't plan your everyday life. So when it happens, maybe you can put it to your retirement.
Yeah, I think a lot of younger people, when they're in uni, they probably don't spend as much, right? But once they get their first paycheck, it's like freedom, right? Hey, I got like $3,000 a month, and what am I going to do with it? Yeah. And then, you start thinking of all the things you can buy that maybe you previously can't afford and don't need.
And I think on the final note on like having CPF contributions when you first start working, you can consider making a CPF nomination as well.
Right.
Yeah. So
I didn't think of that, but why? How do you feel about
that
it?
just means, you bypass the hassle for your family members or, people who are potential beneficiaries by just stating your intentions. Hey, this is who you want to give your CPF to. If you pass on, right? Unexpectedly pass on.
Yeah. And then of course, as you grow older, you reach, the parents' age, like we are in that age. I think there's a lot more things that, you probably need to think about when it comes to retirement planning. Yeah. I think one of the things that, for sure, it's something we have to think about is when you buy a house, which we have discussed a lot. If you don't review your housing affordability, if you're not exactly sure how much you can afford, you can check out the CPF Home Purchase Planner. I think that will help you. I think the trick here is to buy a home that will not compromise on your retirement goals, right? And I think over allocating your resources on property is just one thing that's very, very easy to do in Singapore, all right? Because everybody wants that bigger, more expensive home. But if you can, calculate your budget correctly and buy within your means, you get the home you need as well as the retirement you want, right? So I think that's one thing for sure we do. I think the next thing is obviously children expenses. How do you feel? Like a lot of parents, they spend a lot of money on their kids' expenses or like kids'
I think
education.
kids in Singapore are inevitably expensive as well. But I want to go back to that point you last said, right? Don't overextend yourself buying a too expensive home because it affects your retirement plans as well. But if you do that with your home, then it also affects other financial goals like saving for your kids' university education, right? If you overcommit to one thing, then you're deprioritizing not just your retirement plan, but your kids' education fund, maybe your other financial goals that you may wish for, starting a business that you mentioned at the start. It could be simple, smaller things like, even travel.
Yeah, maybe you want to travel, but now you can't travel as much because you spend so much on your home.
Yeah, correct. And then we're talking about kids' expenses. Typically expensive in Singapore. I think you have a few kids, so do I. It's quite expensive. But then again, you need to ensure that you also don't pay too much for kids' activities. Personally, I feel.
I mean, if you want to pay a lot,
5 days a week to a
the only thing I can say is that if you want to spend a lot on your kids in Singapore, you definitely can.
There's no end. There's no end.
You need to set a budget.
So many
you need to set a logical budget in line with what you can afford and without deprioritizing other parts of your life as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I also think at this age group, right, an extension to the fact that you have kids now, you should relook your protection plans, right? Because life insurance is so important at this age group in particular. So when you're a bit younger, maybe you can argue, hey, I don't have any dependents relying on my income, so I don't need so much life insurance. But at this age group, you definitely need life insurance and enough life insurance because you have a lot of people depending on your income. If you live with your elderly parents, they may be reliant on your income. If you live with your spouse who's housewife, obviously dependent on income. And children, right? They need to be dependent until they turn 18, 21 or even 25, right? Because sometimes you do NS for guys and then you have your university education after that, like up to 25.
Yeah. So that's I think the healthcare coverage and how much you're covered, how much you're paying for coverage is a very important topic at this point in life. And even though it's not directly related to retirement, it is in a way also related because while you're planning for your retirement, you still have to take into consideration all these existing needs you have. And I just want to say one more thing, which is also your CPF nomination. I think when we go through different stages in life, we get married, for example, we might want to review our CPF nomination in the event that we pass on how our money or how assets are being transferred, including our CPF dollar, becomes something that's important and may change as we enter different stages in our life.
Yeah. I think we shouldn't just say like when you have kids, you should rethink it. Like I think at every milestone in your life, right? Because the first time you mentioned it was when you just start working, you want to start making your CPF nomination. At that time, you may put your CPF nomination to your
parents
or your parents, right? Because maybe you're not married yet.
Yep.
Then when you get married, you may want to change it again. When you have kids,
it's up to you, but just saying your spouse.
At every life stage, you think about it. Just think about it. It doesn't take a long time.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
It could be your parents still, but it could be your spouse as well at that point. So a lot of consideration here at this age. And then of course, people that are approaching the golden years of their life, I think one thing for sure at this point you will care about is really how much money you have in your CPF your CPF retirement account, as your CPF special account, which will then become your CPF retirement account when you're 55. And then from there, how much you will be able to get from CPF Life, right? And I think if you are 55 and you're intending to retire in 10 years' time, you still have that runway. You still have the runway where you can contribute your bonus every year, for example, to increase the amount in your retirement account so that it hits the kind of CPF Life payout you want when you retire.
Correct.
Right. And I think that's just one thing that's going to be quite important.
Another like trivia is that so when you hit 55, so from 2025 onwards, when you hit 55, the special account will close.
Yeah.
You no longer have 4 CPF accounts.
Yes.
You continue with 3, and then the special account just becomes the retirement account, right? And I think one of the things that maybe people who are retiring don't realize is that their CPF contributions to the retirement account at this age falls to a very low level.
Right. That's true.
So actually, the allocation to retirement is not as much anymore. You can go and check the allocation again. DollarsAndSense have an article, you can see it. But the allocation to this account becomes immediately very low.
Yeah.
Because the mindset is that okay, you would have already set aside your retirement sum.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing is that if we want, we can do a lot more. You can.
Oh, right. I get what you
contribute
mean.
more to this.
Because our own CPF deduction, our own employee contribution at age 55 and above is smaller, which means we get a higher take-home salary, which means compared to a younger person, you're actually taking a higher take-home salary.
Or maybe just more contributions to your OA, actually.
Yeah, so I think
you can do that transfer on your own.
Yeah, so I think the point is that you could use the money and you could top up your retirement account as well, because you are probably drawing a higher take-home salary now compared to when you're younger, because you are contributing less to your CPF as an employee. So that's a good point. I think obviously the other one that goes without saying is really clearing your housing loan.
Yeah, like we mentioned again at the start, at this age group, you need to start thinking, do I really want to continue paying until the day I retire, or should I have that peace of mind a bit earlier in my life as well?
Besides the loan, I think this is really the time where you would probably have to take a look at your healthcare coverage as well. I think one of the first things that I get that question quite often is private integrated shield plan, right? And the reason is because, as I think some of you will already know, private integrated shield plans premiums become a lot more expensive when you become older.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it reaches the point where it can be, it can be a drain on your MediSave account
because most of us buy it at the point we start working, and then that's where it's actually at the lowest.
Or when you are a child and your parents buy for you.
And then the most of us would think that it's affordable, even getting a higher tier or more comprehensive coverage,
because it's still cheaper when you're younger.
And then as we age, we don't realize that this cost is also creeping up very quickly, and then when we enter the pre-retirement age, it goes up a lot.
Like a few $1,000s or more.
I've seen the highest end more than 5K, I think.
I think it's like it just doesn't make sense. I mean, that's my thoughts. I mean,
it depends on affordability, definitely. I think some people will definitely want that coverage still, especially maybe if you're already
having that illness.
Chronic illnesses, you see yourself going to the hospital quite often, then maybe
that's true.
But maybe not just at pre-retiree stage, but maybe even when you join the workforce and when you're buying it for the first time, or when your kid taking over what your parents bought for you, you might want to think long term also, not just for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
And that's a good point. And I think the last thing is really also at this age, I just keep going to stress against CPF nomination, because at that age when you are in your 70s, maybe even your 80s, you may not really feel like you need to, in the event you pass on, you may not be so looking to just pass the money to your spouse at that point.
I think riding on that train of thought, the CPF nomination here becomes more of your legacy planning.
Right.
It's part of your legacy plans already. And the CPF nomination can be one of it, but you might want to do your wills done out properly and all your legacy plans done out properly.
Yeah, but just note that CPF nomination is outside of the will. So if you're doing your will, that's great, but your CPF nomination you also have to do it in order to direct how your estate will be paid out in the event when you pass on. And yes, I think we have a very good discussion, and it's a very lengthy discussion. And I think just to summarize it, I think retirement planning and investing are both interconnected, but they're quite distinct goals as well. And investing is about growing your wealth well, while retirement planning ensures that what you have built for yourself can support you and even your spouse, your family for the rest of your life once you stop working. And by ensuring that you are planning for your retirement, you can ensure that you achieve both your financial goals today as well as long-term financial stability. And after this episode, why not, we talk about the CPF Home Purchase Planner. Feel free to use it, take a few minutes, try it, see if it makes sense for you, especially if you're looking to buy a property anytime soon. And then from there, you can see how your property purchase may fit or may not fit into your ideal retirement plan. Right? Thank you for tuning in today for this episode of Dollars and Cents podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, as usual, don't forget to share it with someone who could benefit from the discussion and the insights. Until next time, remember to plan wisely and live fully.